Hey, it's Ben from Tenants Victoria, here with VCOSS, answering some of your renting questions. Is it legal to withdraw an offer for a rental property on the basis the applicant has used a Department of Family and Fairness home bond loan? So that's a rent assist bond loan program. How do we support a renter who experiences this? Yeah, it's a really tricky question. I had to do a bit of research on this actually recently. When you are applying, so if I can't afford the bond myself, there's a program the government offers that says, actually, we can help you out. We can essentially give you an interest-free loan. The bond is lodged. If you lose any money out of that, you can pay us back at a later point. So it allows me better access into the private market. You can also use it in community housing. In public housing, they don't take bonds. So one of the processes is that you apply and they decide whether you're eligible based on your income, how much of rent you're paying. So you need to meet an eligibility criteria, which means that you need to know the house that you're going to move in. When you go for a rental, they'll often say, oh, you've been approved. And that's really your invitation to come in and sign the agreement. And that's usually the context where this issue of the bond loan comes up, where they say, oh, okay, I just need to put in my bond loan number, the bond voucher number in here, I've applied. And it might be the case that the landlord or the real estate agent says, oh, bond loan, let me just go and talk to the landlord. And then all of a sudden they don't want to proceed with the agreement. And this is kind of a systemic issue, and it can also affect victims, survivors of family violence, where they may have other financial supports that are contributing towards the bond loan. And so while a landlord does need to manage their risk, what's really important is that we don't see people being discriminated. So under the Equal Opportunity Act, being a victim, survivor of family violence in and of itself is not a protected attribute. It's really unfortunate. Maybe we should think about that. What we do need to consider as well, is this a contract? So if I haven't signed the rental agreement, I haven't got the keys, is that discrimination? In our community, making a decision based on someone's financial capacity isn't discrimination, not in a legal sense. There may be some moral culpability for it, but unfortunately this is a really difficult situation to resolve. So we often encourage people to try and sign the agreement first, being pretty confident they're eligible for the bond loan or having some other resource available to get the bond loan. Usually when the bond loan is approved from the department, they will actually send it through directly to the real estate agent or the rental provider, so it can be listed with the Residential Tenancy Bond Authority. So I think that that's a really difficult one. I think there's a bit of a gap that when we introduce the bond vouchers, the idea is that the renter can go and apply for 200 properties and you don't have to get assessed for every property that you're applying for, but you can actually just put the voucher down and go, yeah, it's as good as money. And for the confidence of many landlords and rental providers, it is. It's real money, it's sitting there, it's available through the government, and again, if there's any issues with that, it's just like any other bond. So we really want to see that there are good landlords that recognise the needs of all the members of our community, that everyone's given a fair go. But as far as it being a legal issue that we can say, well, the contract's already been entered, that could be difficult. If there are questions of discrimination, there might be things around, if it's become apparent there's a mental health service and that's where the bond loan might be coming from as a different form of bond loan, then that could be discrimination. So it is worthwhile exploring your options. And again, you probably don't want to be raising that you're getting a bond loan right at the get-go. You may want to sort of leave that right until you're about to sign the agreement. It's up to you how you want to play that. Yeah. Next question. Can a community housing provider request 30% of your rent based on a presumed rent assistance, even if you haven't received it yet? So with public housing, you pay 25% of your income as being your rent. That's what it's based on. It can be for the household income. In community housing, it's usually 30% plus your full Commonwealth rent assistance. So what's really important around this is understanding what's called imputed income. When we pay a rebated rent, there might be a place for $800 a week in Collingwood, really big house, very expensive. That's the market rate. That's what you get if you were renting privately. In social housing, they base it on your household income. So I might be just me, and so it might be just 25% of my income. If I have a number of family members, it's going to look at what income are they getting or what income are they eligible for. So I might have an adult child who's studying and they might be able to get some study payments through Centrelink. All of that information is used to calculate what your rebated rent should be. The issue for some people, if you've ever dealt with Centrelink, is that some people go, I just don't want to deal with Centrelink. I don't want to have to get that little bit of extra money and then find out later on I've got to pay it back. But unfortunately, the policies of a lot of social housing providers is that they impute the income. Even if you don't claim it, they're going to treat you as if you are getting it. So the family tax benefit usually is done at a 15% rate, but yeah, it's a policy issue. It's around fairness. So obviously one of the big tensions is that a lot of that money through Centrelink is coming through federal funding, and we're trying to run housing which falls within sort of the state portfolios and responsibilities. So we obviously want our community housing providers to be as financially viable as possible, but we also want to make sure that people aren't accruing debts or running into Centrelink issues where they might get cut off, or there's disputes about whether they're eligible for certain payments. If there is a dispute about whether or not you're eligible for a particular Centrelink payment, you can raise that in a local complaint and then go to the housing registrar to say, well, look, they say that I'm entitled to this complaint and I don't think that I am. So there are processes. We really want to make sure that people get onto those sort of issues as soon as possible. Otherwise, we can see some situations where the rent arrears grows and gets quite big before they come to us. So be proactive. If you've got an issue around the rental rebate, check your community housing provider's website for their policies. Most of them should be available, or you can request them in writing. But hopefully you can get what you're entitled to and make sure that your rent remains affordable. Certainly within people that receive disability support pension, they're getting the same housing and accommodation. It is still based off 30% of that income. So whether there's a recognition for people within the community with disability and what that extra money is for, we're yet to see. But certainly worthwhile raising about same services, different prices. Next question is, can you challenge a rent increase on the basis the home is currently not compliant with the minimum standards? There's not a specific ground to challenge a notice of rent increase as being valid, which means, is it of effect or can it just be removed entirely as if it was never given? What the law tells us is that they can take into account the condition of the property. So if the property doesn't meet minimum standards, we would infer that it's not in good repair, and that is something that the Consumer Affairs Inspector should take into account. There is some different context. Some consumer affairs officers will say, oh, well, you can get compensation if that's not there, so I won't take that into account. But our position pretty clearly is if your house has got mould everywhere, it's based on the condition the house actually is, and that is something that should go to the issue of rent increase. So if it doesn't meet the minimum standards, absolutely, you can raise that, request a report about the rent increase and whether it's justified, but it won't stop the rent increase. It's only a factor that is considered. So definitely worthwhile. And then lastly, we've got, where do you find a copy of the minimum standards? You will find the minimum standards in Schedule 4 of the rental regulations in Victoria. You can also find them on the Tenants Victoria website. Just Google minimum standards and you should find the link. The minimum standards are really important. They're not a particularly high or onerous standard, but for some houses you're like, geez, I'm glad we have minimum standards. We really have needed them for a long time. If your house doesn't meet the minimum standards, it's also considered to be an urgent repair. What we do know, though, through VCAT is that the minimum standards only apply to rental agreements that have started on or after the 29th of March 2021. So if you've been in your property for a long time before that, then the minimum standards may not strictly apply. But certainly we know with what the law tells us about the landlord or the rental provider's obligation for the property to be in good repair, it's got to be in good repair and a reasonably suitable condition for occupation. So we want to make sure that all the homes that we have are safe, they're electrically safe, they're safe in terms of any gas, they're structurally sound, they're weatherproof. That's why we have minimum standards. So if you're not sure if they meet the minimum standards, seek some advice.